Hello, and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Spring is in full bloom right now, and summer is just around the corner. One of the things that comes with summer for the kids is summer camp. The Eastern Pennsylvania Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church operates several summer camps throughout our area, which are an important ministry. It gives kids a chance to get out and experience God through nature and to learn a little bit about the world around them as well as about the Lord. Or should I put that the other way around? It's kind of hard to separate the two sometimes. We learn about God as creator when we learn about God's creation, just as we learn about God as our redeemer when we come to understand ourselves as human beings who make choices and decisions, who do things that we shouldn't do and don't do things that we should, all that sin and forgiveness stuff, which is actually very important. We learn about God as the Holy Spirit as we go to serve in the world in different ways and discover our gifts and some surprises, things that the Lord says, here, you take this one. I'll help you, but you take it. And as we serve, there we learn about what God is doing in the world at large, in people's lives. And going to camp in the summer for the kids brings them into a little bit of each of those types of experiences at different points. And it also gives them a chance to learn about themselves and to have some fun. We are very close here to one of the conference camps called Camp Inaba. And I went there as a kid myself. If you've noticed, I'm not a kid anymore. And there are things that have changed about Inaba. When I say they've changed, I mean for the better. I really think the bathrooms are a whole lot better there now than they were several decades ago. The pool, however, still needs a little bit of improvement. It has had good use, and they're redoing the whole thing. And they're making it easier for some people to use the pool as well. They're making it handicapped accessible. Back in the day, put it that way, when did I start going there? About third grade. It was just assumed that if you were in a wheelchair, you probably weren't going to be getting the same experience as everybody else would. And that is still the case because people do have to deal with the things that they have to deal with. But at least we're a little more conscious of giving people a chance to do it. And we are learning, believe it or not, that it's up to everybody to help out and to do what we can. Because, well, that's part of learning about what it is to express God's love and to recognize that there's none of us who doesn't have some sort of serious limitation in some area or another. And there is none of us that does not have some special gift in some area or another. So Inaba is rebuilding its swimming pool. And for our current mission project, we're trying to raise some funds to help out with it. And this Sunday, we're having a pancake breakfast. And it will be before church, obviously. And if you're in the area and you're seeing this on Saturday before Sunday arrives, please come and join us. It's $5 a plate, and it's pancakes, it's eggs, it's bacon, orange juice, just all the pancake breakfast kind of stuff. And we'd be glad to have a chance to sit down and eat together. And if you're curious, yes, the church building is also handicapped accessible. And you can roll right in. And if you are so inclined, the dishwasher is at a level where somebody in a wheelchair could do the dishes along with everybody else. There's no reason people can't serve in one capacity if they can't serve in another. Again, we're becoming conscious of these things. It takes time. It takes work. We make mistakes. But we do learn. And God does teach us and help us along. And one thing that we can all do right now, regardless of where we are, regardless of our physical condition, regardless of our mental capacities, regardless of who we are in any way, shape, or form, one thing we can all do and do together is to worship the God who made us, who loves us, and who works with us. I invite you to do that with me right now. Hear these words from the 15th chapter of the Gospel of John, beginning at verse 1. I am the vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I've spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. These were Jesus' words. Thanks be to him. Amen. One of the songs I learned at Campanaba as a child was Pass It On. It wasn't in the hymnal then. It's in the hymnal now. It's a great song. And it begins with a reminder of the time of year where we are now. Well, it doesn't, not the first verse, but the second verse starts out that way. What a wondrous time is spring, when all the trees are budding. The birds begin to sing, the flowers start their blooming. It's a great song. One thing it leaves out, though, of its vision of springtime is the bugs. There are bugs that begin to come literally out of the woodwork in spring. Ants. I have had more ants crawl across my desk in the past 3 weeks than in a few years. And it's because we've had rain and it's driven them inside looking for shelter. I'd go looking for shelter too, but you won't find me crossing your desk now, would you? I've seen some good things. I've seen ladybugs. We need those. They're wonderful things. I've seen several different kinds of bees, and without them, we'd be get it? Ha ha ha. Uh, we wouldn't have the pollination that we need to survive. Bugs. Some of them are good. Some of them are kind of neutral. They may annoy us, but they're not going to hurt much. And then there are some that can do some real damage. There's a kind of aphid called phylloxera, which loves grapes. And if you go out and you're in an area like ours where there are wild grapes and what we used to call monkey vine growing outside up the trees, you will find on the big broadest leaves, especially in the summer, that there are these little tiny yellowish green, they look like tiny dots almost, and they eat up the leaves and turn them into kind of a lace pattern where all the veins are left and everything in between that's the main part of the leaf, making all the chlorophyll or using the chlorophyll to make all the food. It all gets eaten up and you get these beautiful in some ways kind of leaves, but it'll kill the plant. Now, if it kills the monkey vines growing up the tree, no big deal. But it isn't really killing things that way, at least not around here. The danger of these little aphids, these phylloxera, is that they also eat, in fact, when they hatch, all of them are eating the roots of the plant. The plants have developed their own protective system. When they start getting eaten up by they're called the nymphs, which are the immature aphids. And when those start gnawing at the roots begin to secrete this kind of gummy stuff that seals up the holes, the wounds, really is what they are, that the nymphs leave on the roots. And that has to happen because if it doesn't, then the roots tend to be attacked by fungus. And the fungus will kill the grapevines. It's a whole interactive, woven together kind of a thing. As I said, most of the plants around here in North America have developed this protective system, a defense against that. Grapevines native to Europe, however, did not have that same protective mechanism. So in the 1850s, when somebody had the idea to take some samples of American or Canadian plants to Europe to add to the vineyards of that continent, unfortunately, they took aphids along with them. And the phylloxera aphids, the phylloxera began to spread. It affected Spain and it affected Germany, but most of all, it affected France. And by the year 1875, Phylloxera had devastated they figure, about 910,000 acres of vineyards in France. And it did serious harm not only to those vines, but also to the economy that was based on wine production. Entire villages were left in ruins because there was a failure in vineyard after vineyard after vineyard. It was a very serious problem. And it took a while until somebody realized that there was a solution that would not be simple or automatic, but it could be taken, and that over time it might help. And so somebody got the idea of taking rootstock from North America over to these French vineyards and taking the French vine and grafting it onto the North American rootstock that was resistant to phylloxera. And so that worked. And even to this day, it has to be done again from time to time. And the root systems themselves, they've now been able to propagate so that they don't have to send away every year to New York State or to Napa Valley and say, please send us some roots. They're able to do it so that the McDonald's in Paris or Lyon can serve a 2023 Beaujolais with your burger au fromage. All because somebody figured out that if you have a vine and the vine is healthy, it will protect the branches and they will be healthy too. I hope you see where I'm going with this. See, we are the branches. Jesus is the vine, and God is the vine grower. And there are all sorts of things that are like phylloxera to us. All sorts of things that life throws at us and that may harm us directly or may harm us over time. But we don't have the native ability, the inborn ability to deal with it directly ourselves. For that, however, we can rely on the vine grower. For when the vine grower grafts us branches into the vine, then the life that is in the vine itself, the rootstock, protects us and helps us to live and to grow and to do the things that we were made to do to begin with. To be who we're supposed to be. What keeps us going? What keeps us growing? What keeps us as people in the face of the various troubles, the various perils? I love that word, peril. Dangers, difficulties. Use your own word. But it's all that stuff that life throws at us, one way or another. What keeps us going in the midst of that is not something that is inborn, that is necessarily part of our makeup. You know, the absolutely most determined and energetic person who looks like they have the ability to face anything and do anything and to keep on going, they are going to run out of steam at some point. Now, I think back to when I was in college, and it was April. We were coming up on the end of my senior year, and one of my roommates, one of the guys in the apartment, his mother was an amazing woman. She let us know that she was going to be coming up to Boston for the Boston Marathon. And it was especially amazing because the week before that, she had run in the New York Marathon on her 50th birthday. And to us in those, at that point in our own lives, 50, wow, 50 years old. You shouldn't be running. You should be, taking it easy by now. You might hurt something. But here it was. Her 50th birthday, she ran the New York Marathon, and 7 days later, she was running the Boston Marathon. And everybody who met her, we were all very proud of her. Nobody any more so than her son. And there were four of us, and we were lined up toward the end of the route. And we were going to wait there. There was a blanket that was there to wrap her up. And there was some water. This was before water bottles were everywhere, but we had water there for her for the end of the race. A few snacks and things, as I recall. I also think somebody ate some of. Anyway, it was a long time ago, and we were waiting for her toward the finish line, and we waited and we waited and we waited, and it was a matter of hours. But we knew that was going to happen. But there came a certain point at which everybody got a feeling that maybe she had something happen to her before this point. So we broke up into two groups of two and began walking along the route. And two on one side of the road, two on the other. One to look out for her, and the other to look out for the people that we were walking in the opposite direction to, so that we wouldn't bump into it. It was a pretty good system. And eventually it worked because it was her son who actually spotted her, and she was not running anymore. She'd had to drop out. And there was no shame in that. Good grief. None of us, even at our age, were about to run a marathon, let alone a second one in a week. But he helped her back to her hotel and hung out while she rested, just in case something had gone seriously, seriously wrong. And it hadn't. She had just hit the wall, and that was it. And she needed rest before she would run another marathon. But she would. The most energetic, as I say, and the most amazing people can still find themselves up against something that's bigger than them. And sometimes it's themselves. There are not only physical things that come after us, or that limit us, or that put us into those situations, but there are times when people hit that wall emotionally or spiritually as well. And sometimes it all goes together. Sometimes it's a physical thing that sets it off. I want to think about and mention another Boston Marathon that took place much later. This one was in 2013. And that was a marathon where two people with, I would say, evil intent decided that they were going to attack innocent people. And they left bombs, homemade bombs, at the finish line inside a couple trash cans. And when they exploded, 3 people were killed and 264 people were injured. Survivors, there were survivors, of course, but many of them lost limbs and would not walk again, or would do so only with the help of some sort of artificial leg or some kind of prosthesis. Among the survivors, among the runners, were many people. There were about 5,700 people who were running that day. One of them was somebody I knew because I had married his wife and him. I had performed their wedding, that is, a couple years earlier. And he was only about 3 or 4 blocks from the end when the bomb went off. And his wife was a little bit further away. She was going to find him after he let her know he had finished. But she wasn't that far that she couldn't hear what he heard, which was that explosion. And what he saw, she was spared at first. But as she got closer and closer, she began to see the carnage and hear the sirens and people panicked, trying to get away, afraid that there would be another explosion. And she had no idea where he was, and he had no idea where she was. And each of them knew that it was quite possible that the other could have been killed. That's what made him keep on going toward the ending, and her to run toward the place where the explosion had taken place, which meant that they were running toward each other. And they found each other. But it was a terrible thing, a horrible day. People were wounded in many ways, in addition to the physical wounds. Those 2 people among them. Collateral damage, you might call it. But that doesn't really cover what happens to people like that. They had become victims of terror perpetrated by terrorists, as had we all, to a greater or a lesser extent. Now bring that kind of experience into the present, which doesn't really take a lot of imagination. Very sad to say. The whole tragic mess that's going on right now in Israel and in Gaza, for instance, and it's only one of many places around the world where this kind of thing is going on. It's a place where there is fighting and terrorism and pain and death and injury, not only among specific people going after each other, but uh, people around those people. And that's why I find it so impossible, and I mean impossible, to say that anybody at all who lives there or who has ties to someone there is not also in some way a casualty of what is happening there. Whether it's a casualty of the things that led up to the October 7th events, things that have brought about the existence of Hamas, people who were kidnapped, slaughtered, raped on October 7th, people who were affected by the inevitable counterattack in the weeks and months since then. All of those people have been harmed in one way or another, and not just physically. And the difficulties and the splits and the acrimony and the opportunism that has come with trying to make sense of it, that is also a terrible thing. These are the things that strangle our lives. These are the things that poison our systems. These are the things that seek to gnaw at our being so that all the rightful anger turns to bitterness, so that the natural grief turns into a desire for revenge, so that the longing for peace turns into a willingness to just shut everything down because of despair that efforts at any other kind of peace are being pushed further and further and further and further into the distance every time something happens. Where is the healing? Where is the hope? Well, I go back to the hope that I saw in what happened for those two people I knew after the Boston Marathon explosion. Despite the chaos and the danger, they had run toward one another. Any sort of natural response would be to run away, to keep yourself safe. But they loved each other. They still do. And because of that, they ran toward one another. And that kind of love is where hope begins and is to be found. And going even further than that, eventually, a couple years later, the guy ran in another Boston Marathon. He hadn't finished, after all, the one in 2013. He wanted to do it and to do it right. And that took courage. It took courage on his part. It took courage on his wife's part. It took courage on the part of their families. It took understanding to say, yes, we understand why you need to do this. It took the kind of love that would say, we don't understand why you need to do this, but we know that it's a real thing and we'll be praying for you and for ourselves and for everybody in that race. Because when he ran it again, he wasn't just racing against the clock. That kind of response doesn't just come from a natural stubbornness baked into a human being. It comes from somewhere deep inside where God is at work, where God is healing the soul in a way that sometimes forces somebody to go against their fears. There's a verse in the Bible that says, perfect love casts out fear. Well, where do you find perfect love except in God? And somehow, sometimes God will say, listen, I need you to say this to the world somehow. You need to say to the world, you're not going to stop me from doing what I should be doing. You're not going to end it on a note like that, or that kind of harm. There's a courage and an energy that comes from God and that helps people to heal and to move beyond simple healing into ministry, into service, into prophetic acts, into acts of love and expressions of love. There's a kind of energy and a kind of hope that comes from God that helps people to act faithfully through troubled times without themselves becoming troubled, to catch their second wind and to move on. So, as Jesus said, abide in him, stick with him, stay nearby, stay plugged in, because whatever it takes for you to do that is worth doing. Stay close to the scriptures. Memorize a verse that jumps out at you that you find helpful. Spend some time lingering on it. If you're having a bad day, hum your favorite hymn. Whistle it. Sing it quietly to yourself. Doesn't matter whether you remember the words or not. Doesn't matter if you get the music right or not. Whatever is sustaining your soul through thick and thin, reminding you that Jesus is right there with you. Hold on to that. Pray. And it doesn't have to be a long or a complicated prayer. It could be, Lord, get me through the next minute or the next 10 seconds or the next hour. Please, if that's too long, too complicated a prayer, how about help? Just help. Abide in me, said Jesus. And if you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it'll be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. There's no magic formula that says you have to do this or that or the other, and then God will do the bit on the other end of this deal. But when we do stay close to him, when we do abide in him, when we do linger with him, when we let his life flow into our hearts, from the vine into the branches, then we live part of his life, and his life carries a bit of ours forward too. And we find things, even in the worst situations, somehow coming together in his time and in his way for our good and for God's glory. Thanks be to him for when it happens, and thanks be to him for the times it doesn't have to be that way. But it's good to know that when it needs to, that he'll make sure his life is right there for us, as he always is. Amen.